The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to this DMA Data Community webinar. I'm Lisa Marizio-Smith, and along with others, we manage 5 DMA member communities which you can find on the DMA website. We're so glad you made time today to join us for this content developed by members like you. So please send us feedback and suggestions for future topics. Also, if you're interested in becoming active on this group, just contact us for more information. As a reminder, DMA members attending today will automatically be included in this data community to stay informed of future activities. So participate as much or as little as your time allows. For our data community members, here are a few updates. Our regional roundtables have been very well received. These half-day programs with terrific networking will be in Boston and New York City in September. So watch your emails for those announcements. Our past event recordings and other resources are available to you and your colleagues on the DMA website, the Data Community website. Our next webinar is actually from the mobile digital community on customer retentions called Your Customers, You Got 'Em, Now Keep 'Em. And that is with 1-800-PET-MEDS and Moblico. So again, more and so much more can be found at the dma.org. And now for today's webinar, feel free to use the question function during the presentation to pose your inquiries. They will be addressed in the order that they come in at the end of the presentation. We'll also be on Twitter, so you can continue the conversation at #DMA Communities. And now I'm pleased to introduce our featured speaker, Laura Patterson, President and Founder of VisionEdge Marketing. Laura?
Thank you, Lisa, and everyone at the DMA and all of you for joining us today. We have a pretty jam-packed set of information to go through, and as well as a case study. So I look forward to entertaining any questions at the end, and you can always reach out to me if I don't get a chance to answer everyone's question today. So for a moment, I just would like to ask you to step back as we have this webinar together and just imagine what's on the agenda today. And the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges, and we'll go through some data in a moment, is making marketing's data relevant to the C-suite and being able to help the leadership team use that information to guide strategic decisions, particularly decisions around what markets and customers are going to provide growth opportunities. Growth is the mandate today, particularly organic growth, and CEOs and CFOs, this is kind of at the top of their priority list for almost every organization we have worked with of any size in any region. It's all about growth. Second, which products to market and to which customers to market, and what is and isn't working. I'm not going to spend very much time going through anything about us. I hope that you'll come check us out at VisionEdgeMarketing.com, but I would like to go ahead and jump into today's discussion. And I think the way to begin to craft today's discussion is to welcome you to what is being called the intelligent enterprise. And it's only going, as we do more and more with AI and other things, we're going to begin to see that become even more so. So some of the data that's out there is that the data-driven culture, companies who are doing this well are about 3 times more likely to be ahead of their peers in terms of financial performance. So if you're wondering if it's worth all the energy and effort it takes to do this kind of work that we're going to be talking about, it does have wonderful implications, positive implications to the business. And a study that was done not very long ago and published in eWeek was about the usage of analytics and the adoption of data-driven culture. And again, another study that talked about business success. So I guess the message I'm trying to share with you from these headlines is that it's a worthwhile pursuit, because 60% of the global businesses that are out there believe that big data is going to improve their decision making and make them more competitive. And perhaps you've even seen this particular one that came out in IDC that was looking at past performance and future performance in terms of how much data is going to be out there and how much of it's going to be useful. And then just, I suspect you, like us and so many of the people we work with, are feeling, fire hosed by data, swept into the vortex of data. And one of the key reasons that is that even though we're collecting a lot of data, there's the biggest challenge most organizations are facing is the management of that data. And so now I just kind of want to lead with the notion that those companies that can do this well, not only do they see positive financial performance for the organization, they also find that it frees up some resources within marketing so that those resources can be allocated in other pursuits. And so it does matter. Last message here about the data is that the last study done by the Economic Intelligence Unit found that those organizations that emphasize decision making based on data and analytics see a 5 to 6% better performance than those who just rely on intuition and experience. So having laid the context and hopefully impressed upon you how important data is to the business, I want to tell you that it's a big challenge for marketing. We have been doing work in this space since 1999. My background is in data and analytics. I've been in industry a very long time. I've stopped saying how long. And one of the key things that we've been doing research over the last since 2001 is in this area of marketing performance management and particularly data. And this is from the most recent study done with Hive9 and Valid USA, which just came out. And one of the things we learned is that for the most part, marketers are not perceived to be very good at data. In fact, they don't have a very good data rep. Only about a third of marketers out there are doing a decent job of data. And so what do we need to do to be able to manage this deluge of data? So we have looked at marketing organizations over the course of these 16 years, and we've been able to identify personas associated with marketing organizations around data and around performance management. And we call those three personas value creators, sales enablers, and campaign producers. And the value creators are the best-in-class marketers, and they are the ones that get very high marks from the C-suite, the COO, the CEO, the CFO, and others for their ability to prove their value, to use data to make strategic decisions, and to employ analytics, all the things that best-in-class marketing organizations do. And so one of the things we look at is, well, is there a difference in the personas in their ability to use data? And the value creators, are you doing much better at using data, particularly around strategic decisions? But there are plenty of room for improvement on all fronts by all of the personas. So managing the effectiveness of to achieve its objectives, to make course adjustments, to improve operational efficiency. These are all areas where data is really, really important, and every marketing organization needs to improve. So does it make a difference? And so one of the things that we have been looking at is the grade over the long term that the C-suite gives the marketing organizations. And what we've been able to see is that kind of the best-in-class marketers have hovered pretty much for the last few years at around 1 in 4, 1 in 5 marketing organizations. And we've been looking at, I just am sharing 10 years of data here. And you can see that the value creators are this sort of gold line. The blue line or teal line, those are your sales enablers. They're getting about a B, that's 80 to 89 on their score, and you can see that they've dipped significantly down from where they were just 5 years ago and kind of came up and saw a little slight slippage actually in their number this year. And then the campaign producers, which are the C and D grades, the C's kind of came down, but the D's are going up. And so what that tells us is that we're seeing B's falling into C's and C's falling into D's. And so expectations are rising, really rising on marketing to be able to do a better job. And so the key thing is to make the data relevant. And so what we know right now is that this is the biggest challenge for a large number of marketers, particularly the campaign producers, in being able to make their data relevant. And they represent over a third of marketing organizations. In terms of the relationship of data relevancy and business decisions, you can see they're like in step with one another. Though when the data is relevant, the business decisions are better, and so value creators have a better reputation for their data to be relevant as well as facilitate a business decision. So as you're thinking about this, and I'm going to share with you shortly some ways to use data and what you need to be doing with your data, you may want to give some thought as to where you might fit on this continuum and which kind of persona best reflects you. So let's talk about data. We know that data is one of the most important assets we have in marketing, and we have lots of it. We have the structured data, which is the traditional business data, you know, rows, columns, and whatnot. And then we have the unstructured data, which a lot of people have referred to in the past as big data, but it's really all this data that comes from what used to be considered non-traditional sources: blogs, social media, email, videos, photographs, all of those kinds of things that are now becoming actually quite traditional, but the digital footprints that are being left behind, and all the things that have to do with social and social listening. And so as we think about data, one of the recommendations we often make to our customers is to organize your data into customer-centric categories. And we would recommend 5 of them. The sort of demographic data, you know, what kind of quality demographic data do you have, as well as psychographic data? You know, what do you know about your customers? What do they buy from you? What triggers their purchases? Who they are? What segments they're in? I'm going to talk a lot more about segments, or anything else that we can put in there. Titles would go there. Size of company would go there. Type of company would go there. Then spend and financial data. You know, which customers buy? What do they buy? How often do they buy? All of the things that would go here. Interaction and engagement data, how they interact with you, when, how often, what channels are their preferences. Consumption and usage data, how and what are they using in terms of what they have purchased from you, both services as well as products. And then relationship data. You know, this would be satisfaction, loyalty, advocacy, or sentiment-related data that you might see from some of the information that you might collect, whether that's product reviews or references or any of the other things that you might collect. So, you know, as you're thinking through this conversation today, think about how you have your data organized. It may not be in this fashion, but it is important to have the data organized in some fashion. And we find with a lot of the folks we work with, this is a really good starting point, because it allows them then to think about the data sets. And when you think about the data sets, you can now take the data that you have organized and you can put them into the data sets. And so the mostly structured kinds of data is the stuff that we are very accustomed to having: market, business, and customer activity data. And then the social media, the comments, reviews, the shares, all of those kinds of things, that's mostly unstructured. But the other kinds of sets that are important for marketing to be able to have access to is like transactional data. Many marketing organizations really don't have their hands on that, even though they may have CRM systems or marketing automation systems. The actual transactions that are occurring in the financial systems and the ERP systems, that's really important. Everything, of course, today that's happening on the web, and many of our customers are not only using Google Analytics, but lots of other tools to get website data. And we recommend that. And then voice of customer, telecom, call center, chatbot, all those kinds of things that need to be collected. And then lastly, images and graphics, which also are unstructured. So as you begin to think about your categories, you're going to want to think about the data sets and how those work together. And so that takes us into how marketers use data. And so what we find, again, if you look at the personas, the value creators are much better at using the data around the customer buying journey, around optimizing content within the stages of that journey, around orchestrating the content in terms of the best way to deliver it, understanding and measuring the customer experience, everything that's related around determining which customers are at risk of defection, creating buyer personas. The one area that they seem to be kind of on par with or a little behind has to do with gaining customer insights around buying criteria and channel preferences. So again, another real opportunity for all marketers to make some improvements there. And so I think the next thing that I would like to talk a little bit about is, now that we have this data, what happens next? And so data that doesn't help you see what isn't really useful. So one of the things we know from various studies is that the key challenge isn't data. The key challenge is getting the data into insights that then can be actionable. And that seems to be pretty common in all the research that's going on out there, is being able to analyze and act on the data. Not so much to collect it, not so much to manage it, but really analyzing it and acting on it. And so that takes us to the whole idea of how to do that. And so I want to introduce analytics. I know a lot of marketers today are still working on honing their skills in analytics. Some are doing much better than others. And we'll talk a little bit about analytics skills. But in today's world, every marketer in every facet of marketing needs to have analytics capabilities and skills. It isn't something that can just be one person in the organization or a team in the organization that understands what that means and how to do it. Everyone in marketing needs to have some level of skills around analytics. And I just want to remind us all that the journey of analytics is not really new. We've been using analytics in marketing for a very long time. It's been a part of my career since before the 80s. And when you think about analytics and their purpose, you know, it's been applied in different ways, but in the end, it's all about making fact-based decisions. You know, fact-based data and insight-driven decisions. It doesn't matter what decade you were from and where that journey was. Today, it's all to do the same thing. So one of the things that Gartner has put out there that I like is understanding your analytics maturity. And we're going to come back and look at that also with some of the work that's done by Tom Davenport. But I think this is a really interesting way to get a sense of where you are in your data and journey and your analytics maturity. And so one of the things we try to understand when we're working with customers is, are they down at the hindsight information, what happened stage, or are they further up looking at sort of diagnostic or predictive, or if they've gone even further than that, and are they looking about, you know, at the prescriptive? How can we make something happen, beginning to do the kinds of modeling? And we'll talk about modeling in just a moment. So the key thing here is to know where you are and then have a plan on how you're going to move through each of these stages. And there may be multiple paths depending on what you're trying to do. And it's the further you go up and to the right, the harder it is, but the greater the value is. So create a plan to move to the next level wherever you are. And if there's anybody that's involved in this conversation today that's already at the pinnacle, we would love to hear from you, and I'm sure everybody else would too, and what you've done and how you've done it, and all the things that you have put in place to be successful there. So as Gartner has acknowledged in their work and what we have seen in our work, is it's pretty hard. It's not an easy thing to do for all different kinds of reasons. And so if we do it well, it should help us identify the customer path to purchase and experience problems and opportunities. That's the key, one of the key things that we want to be doing, because marketing is all about finding, keeping, and growing the value of customers. We are a customer-facing organization. It's our job to create customers and create value for those customers and extract value from those customers, so ultimately we can help our companies be successful in the marketplace. And so that means we really need to be able to bring that story, those opportunities to the table. We need to be able to use the data to create and innovate and redesign and re-engineer processes and systems so that we can improve strategy, improve marketing initiatives, the customer experience, and product. And we need to be able to evaluate strategic and tactical options that are going to deliver desired results, and that takes analytics. And then lastly, we have to be able to have models that we can use to help us anticipate customer and market behavior. So those are the 4 kinds of reasons to go ahead and move your journey forward, and the value proposition around this kind of effort. And what does it take to do that? So you start with these sort of, if you think about this from a jewelry perspective, right, gem perspective, we start with the raw gems, which aren't always all that attractive in the raw form, but they're still kind of pretty. I mean, anyone who's ever looked at those. And then we begin to refine them. And so we have refined them by applying the analytics and then organizing that into some way so that we can begin to understand what we're learning from that. And so when we work with our customers, we always say use 2 guiding principles in this process. What are we using the data? How can we use the data and the analytics to identify and create customers? And then how can we use the data and analytics to create and extract customer value? All right, so we believe that you should start with 5 key questions. And I love this statement from Bernard Marr. And if you're not familiar with Bernard, I recommend that you get familiar with him. He's got several books out, and he tweets, and he has some really great content on LinkedIn. But one of his key messages is to get the most out of data, you need to know what you want to know. And I think this is really an important message, because otherwise we just kind of swirl around in the data, and it's in control of us instead of us being in control with them. So when we're working with a company, and we're about to talk about one in particular, is we're asking the question, what is it you need to know? What decision do you want to make? And then what kind of information, what do you need to know to be able to make that decision? And so use data to answer questions like this. These are the most important questions that we hear all the time. There are variations on the theme, and there are ancillary and other questions, but we consistently hear these 5 questions. Predominantly, we hear these from CEOs and CFOs and people in the sales organization and other parts of the organization, and of course in marketing. But it would be really helpful if marketing was leading these questions as opposed to being asked these questions. So if you want to take the lead, these are the questions that most of the time we are hearing from the C-suite. So which markets and segments should we go and pursue? And how do we gain access? And today's whole conversation is going to be around having a segmentation-based strategy. How to best acquire new customers? How do we keep the ones we have? Which existing markets and customers should we grow? And that comes back to really understanding segments. What new products should we develop, and how do we accelerate adoption? Once again, if you have a segmentation-based strategy, that can be very helpful. And which channels create the greatest response, lift, and engagement? And again, segmentation. So segmentation can be very, very powerful in answering these questions. And I love this comic strip, so I couldn't have this session without sharing this comic strip from Snuffy and Lukey. And maybe some of you are familiar with Snuffy Smith and this comic strip, but Snuffy and Lukey, they only like to do a few things together. They play cards together, they do some moonshine work together, and they go fishing. And this comic strip is on one of their fishing outings. And Lukey is saying to Snuffy, wow, that's a lot of bait, Snuffy. And Snuffy's saying, today I'm prepared. Some of the fish bite with worms, and some of them want something else, right? Some of them want crawlers, some of them want wigglers. And so he's going to put out an entire smorgasbord or a buffet so that everything will be out there depending on what they want to eat. And the message here is, if you don't know your customers and you don't know what they need and what is going to resonate with them, you end up putting out a smorgasbord. And that's sort of, you know, a place that many marketers have been and are still struggling to get out of, is how do we know and work with data and analytics so that we are giving the customer what they want, when they want it, in the form that they want it. So who are they, right? So that's back to the fish. What do they buy, when and why? How do they buy it? Who does the buying and recommending? What triggers the buying process? What influences the buying decision? And lastly, what are their buying criteria and preferences? These are the basic questions we should be able to bring to the conversation anytime and every time that we're putting out a marketing plan and a marketing campaign. And so again, this all takes data. And this leads us to the conversation with Tom Davenport and Gene Harris. If you haven't read their book on competing on analytics, you know, it's summertime, grab their book, find a poolside shady spot, and go through this book, because this is a valuable way to understand where your organization is. Because one of the challenges we find when we work with marketing organizations is they want to get to the top of the summit, but they haven't, their culture isn't quite ready to do that. So you need to look at your organization, understand where the culture is, because it's kind of a crawl, walk, run process. And it's very hard to get to running if we haven't done the other things. So some organizations are just kind of don't even have the quality data they need or the skills that they need, and that needs to be put in place first. And then you kind of move into a mostly reporting stage. We find a lot of companies are really right here, very localized in analytics, especially in marketing. It's mostly reporting, and if you go back to that Gartner, it's mostly descriptive. Then they move into a role where they start putting in some BI tools, but it's often challenging for marketing to get access to that information. And from there, you have to get to that quality data and a company-wide culture that's addressing those kinds of questions, customer-centric questions all of the time. That's when you're finally getting to be an analytics company. And finally, when you can merge that internal and external data, build the models, particularly the predictive and prescriptive models, finally you can be analytically competitive. So these are the stages. Figure out where you are. So using this in Gartner, you can kind of figure out where you are and put a plan together on where you want to go. For discussion, some key takeaways for you from the work that we did and the work that we do. I mean, this can apply to any industry. You might not have Claritas, but there are many other ways to use existing segmentation models or to create your own, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the key thing I think for you to take away from this example, and it's just an example of how any company can move from sort of catch-all kind of marketing to something more segment-based, is first, data helps you focus and prioritize. You really have to be confident and comfortable in embracing data. And then you have to be willing to say, okay, we're only going to fund and resource those things that are aligned with the outcomes and the strategy we're trying to pursue. Because it's very easy to see other cool things and think about doing other cool things, but it is quite important to be focused. You have to have a strategy and a plan that's designed to strengthen the leadership's perception of marketing as a strategic player. So our goal in this particular example was to begin to position marketing in a much more strategic capacity as opposed to the organization that was what we called 1-800 marketing. 1-800 marketing, I need a new brochure. 1-800 marketing, I need a change to the website. 1-800 marketing, we need to go to this event. 1-800 marketing, we need a press release, whatever it might have been that they were getting called to do tactically, which they were extremely proficient at doing, and it exemplifies a campaign producer. This is a group that really wanted to become a value creator, and so really having to think differently about what that meant. And being able to say, if you agree that these are the areas that we're going to pursue, we're going to take a proactive approach on how to go after those segments. And that means some of the things that come with 1-800 marketing are going to have to go on the back burner. And so that whole transition, and that's a transformation, and it takes really good communication to make that happen. Employee data, employer process, employer plan to increase the organization's confidence and the credibility of marketing. We have found, and I'll share with that you in a moment, the value creators, those best-in-class marketing organizations who can make their data relevant, who can help facilitate the strategic decisions and build out strategies based on those insights, they are gaining the influence and credibility in the organization. And the way they do that is they understand the business questions. So going back to the very front end of this discussion is, what are the business questions? And then using the market, customer, and competitive knowledge to make marketing more relevant. I think this is the key thing, because if you want control over your programs, then you need to be able to demonstrate that what you're doing is relevant to the business. So this takes us into the thing about getting started with models. So models are really important, and just in a recent conversation with a number of folks about models and how challenged many marketers are. And you need to know what math to use. And so not every marketer is going to need this extent of math, but they should be exposed to understanding the analytics that are possible and when to use them. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this is pretty technical, but I do think it's important that every organization think about the models they need, and then the steps to developing a model. So you need check your literature, see if there's a model already out there that you can use, which is what we did, right? Why reinvent something when it's already out there and being used, and is something that has become kind of a standard in the industry. So we didn't create one, we used one that already existed. And whenever we work with financial services organizations, we tend to use that because it's a model that already exists and has been well proven and well defined. Gather what you already know, what your assumptions are, your data, classify your known variables. So we spent a lot of time doing that, and then making a list of the unknown variables as we built out the model. And so as we got better and better, and as the organization got better and better, we could be able to fill those models in. Be clear about your approach. Build your initial model, identify the parameters, the equations that you're going to need, develop a plan on how you're going to estimate, the parameters from the data, and then test, because, models are kind of a living, breathing thing, and as we live in a dynamic world, it's very fluid, and so we need to be able to make adjustments and revise our models, so they need to be validated throughout the entire process. So we recommend that every marketing organization should have a basic model library. That model library, first and foremost, segmentation models. I mean, segmentation is a fundamental capability of marketing, and it's something we should be able to do pretty well. So build out a segmentation model. And when you have segmentation models, then that leads you to the ability to do persona development and persona modeling. And that allows you to begin to do the whole personalization, right? Buying process models. Different segments, different personas may have different buying processes, so you want to be able to be sure you have clarity around that. And touch point allocation models. There's a lot of work going around today around marketing mix modeling and attribution modeling, and touch point allocation modeling is very much in the literature right now, so that's important. Pricing models. Many marketing organizations are no longer involved in pricing, but others are, and so it's really important to have good pricing models. Opportunity scoring models and campaign lift models are really important as well. A lot of folks are using CRM and marketing automation systems and tools to help with the pipeline engineering, demand generation, demand creation, and that means you have to have really good opportunity scoring models. And we have a lot of articles on our website on opportunity scoring models, so if you're curious about how you might craft one of those, you might find that to be helpful. I've already mentioned attribution and mix models. Predisposition to purchase models are really important, and that's beginning to move up that Gartner chart, or that climb, right, is understanding based on what you know about your customers and what they buy and what they have been buying and other things, other information, what are they most likely to buy next, right? So that's kind of an important thing. And then likelihood of effect, customer risk models, again, very, very important. And then the last one I want to speak about is portfolio management models. So this, if take a moment, say, oh, do we have these models in our library? If we don't have any of these models, which models should we have sooner than later? If we have all of these, kudos to you. We have yet to meet an organization that has every single one of these completely refined, although we have met organizations that have inklings of all of these, which is really cool. And there's been a lot of conversations certainly around segmentation, personas, buying process, attribution, campaign lift. Campaign lift is probably one of the oldest models in marketing, and so hopefully you have that pretty well refined. So as we move into the last part of this conversation, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is not easy work. This isn't something we do in our sleep. We really have to be cognizant of what we're doing, and it's intentional, it's deliberate. It takes practice, but does it matter? And it does really matter, because if you look at the impact on the business, it's the value creators that have significant more impact. It doesn't mean that they're always have 100% impact, but they're on a scale of 0 to 100% in terms of impact, 46% impact, more impact on the business than campaign producers. And what does that mean? So if we look at all the things that a CFO and a CEO, and whether it's a private or publicly held organization, but the board, and what they're looking at, they're looking at things like revenue growth. They're looking at marketing contribution to pipeline. They might look at win rate. They're looking at share of wallet, customer retention, acquisition of net new customers, the inquiry rates, the customer loyalty, the opportunity to, the ability to generate new opportunities. These are the kinds of things that most organizations are looking at as indicators of business health. And so these aren't all of them, but these are some really good solid ones. I'm sure that you're familiar with many of these in your own organization. You can see that without exception, the value creators are better at doing these than almost any of the other groups. It's kind of interesting about win rate. I think that while it's really important for us to do our job around new opportunities and inquiry and customer retention, ultimately it's the sales guy who's closing the deal. You got to have the right products, so there's some role in products there, so I think that reflects here in these numbers. And I think it's also interesting that considering the value creators are typically perceived as being more focused on how to create value as opposed to just servicing the sales organization, they do an extraordinary job of the inquiry rate and generating net new opportunities and net new customers compared to those who are predominantly focus on servicing the sales team with some kind of qualified leads or demand gen or campaign producers who are extraordinarily good at producing the stuff of marketing and bringing it to fruition. Does it matter? It really does, because we have seen that the value creators have both greater credibility and greater influence in their organizations than their counterparts. Now, it'd be nice if they had 10s, but they're still up there. You know, it's not awesome, but it's better than what we're seeing from the other groups. So it's a start in the right direction. So first things first, you know, if I had to make some suggestions, you've got to have this evidence-based sort of insights-driven culture, and that really starts at the top. So if you don't have that, you need to find an executive sponsor who really believes in this, because that's what's going to allow you to move through the analytics maturity and stages of being an analytics competitor that both Gartner and Davenport talk about. Got to build the skills and add capabilities, whether that's a data scientist or an analyst, some leadership talent, and you know, you might not be able to build all of that internally right away. So be willing to buy. I mean, that's, I think, the beauty of having the opportunity today to tap experts. For those of us who've been doing this work for a very long time, reach out, tap their expertise until you have what you need. Know your data, what data you have, understand the format that you need, get a sense of what really is or is not available. A lot of our folks, when they go through the data inventory process, are pretty amazed at what they have, and they're also pretty shocked by what they don't have. Be clear about what are all the market, customer, competitive, business, program, product data that you currently are capturing versus what you ought to be capturing. Know what systems they're in, how frequently that data is updated and by whom, who in marketing has access or should have access to that data, what you wish you had that's not on your list and why it would be important, what questions it would help you answer back to those questions, and sort of prioritize your data wish list. So really this is about creating a data inventory. Again, we marvel at some of our customers who've done an exceptional job here, but there are many marketing organizations who could do this work much better. And then create a roadmap. How are we going to move from that descriptive to predictive to prescriptive summit and journey? And so put that roadmap together. And then, as I've mentioned in the past, you know, you have to think through the sort of how we focus on creating and extracting customer value. That's really our job in marketing. So start with what you need to know. That's key. So what are the questions that we need to answer? Use, whether it's Tuthill's sort of model of collect, organize, analyze, synthesize, or someone else's, look for those actionable patterns that are going to improve the customer experience and marketing. Remember to incubate. You know, what might appear really cool at the outset might just be, you know, a red herring. So incubate your insights, then make a decision, take action. I mean, we find, you know, it's very easy to get into analysis paralysis, having spent 14 years in engineering community and then another 3 years in the software environment. It's easy to get into analysis paralysis. So you want to be able to make decisions, take action, develop customer-centric models, and whether it's the list that I'm sharing with you that we think ought to be in your library, or you have another list, but develop them and get them refined, and then test, measure, learn, revise. It's, you know, typical learning organization, cultural development types of work. So I'm going to open this up to Q&A. I'd love for you to review your learnings. I would be thrilled if one of you would share a takeaway or something you want to do differently. We have a great white paper on our website. It's complimentary. Just register, log in, download. It's called Intuition to Wisdom. A good part of what's in here is shared in that, not all of it. And then request a copy, of this presentation. You can mail me directly, or you can send it to NPM at VisionEdge Marketing. And with that, Lisa, I'd like to open it up to questions. We have about 10 minutes maybe or so. And for those of you who want to reach out and connect, feel free. I would love to do that.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Laura. That was really a wonderful presentation. Very, very informative. So yes, as Laura said, we still have time to get your questions in, so please do so. We have a first question. Should we outsource our analytics or add this to our marketing team?
That's a great question. And not knowing, what you have, or, if you're an organization of one or an organization of hundreds in marketing would make a difference. But my feelings are that you have to start at some point, and if, by the time you add it to your team, you could be falling behind the curve. So it's kind of something maybe to think about doing in tandem. If you don't have any skills today at all, then yes, do some outsourcing. Or if you don't have the resources to outsource, look inside the organization and see if there are other people that you could collaborate that have the skills. People like in quality or people in finance oftentimes have some analytics skills that you might be able to access while you build it. As I said, though, ultimately every marketing person, every marketing professional needs some degree of data analytics skills. We really work hard to make sure the folks in our organization, when they are new to us and coming out of school, get exposed to data and analytics right out of the gate, because it is such an important skill today. It's as important as being able to write and present today in marketing. I hope that answered the question.
Yes. Thank you very much, Laura. I think you answered the next one. Does everyone on the marketing team need analytic skills? Obviously, a resounding yes.
Lisa, it reminds me when I do some teaching every now and then. Not so much now, but a few years ago I used to do a lot more teaching at universities, and particularly undergraduates, and as a guest lecturer, as a special program. And I remember a number of years ago, this has been a while, it's not recent, I think people no longer are willing to say this out loud. One of the young people raised their hand and says, if I'd wanted to do math, I wouldn't have gone into marketing. And I worked really hard to not stutter as I heard that. And my comment is, math has come to marketing. We really have to embrace it. You can't run from it.
Very, very true. That's probably one of the reasons why we recognized that we changed our name from Direct Marketing to Data and Marketing Association, because it's just a necessity. Data-driven marketing is where it's at.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
And our analytics community couldn't be happier. Okay, so our next question is, where in the marketing organization should an analytics function reside? Okay,
so I want to say that yes, every marketing professional should have some analytics skills, but clearly that they have other jobs to do too, right? So they need to have the skills that are going to be helpful to whatever it is that they're supposed to be bringing to the conversation, bringing to the organization. So I do recommend having an analytics function, whether that's, and one of the places that might be a good way to consider it is what we call an insights and intelligence function. So that allows customer insights, competitive intelligence, market insights, business intelligence, all of that to kind of be together. And I really think that that is a great place to begin that, having a function like that. And if you can make that be a standalone function, that would be great. If it can't be a standalone function, there are places within the marketing organization that it might naturally fit, whether that would be strategy and planning or might be marketing ops. There could be some places that might naturally fit. But if you can make it be an insights and intelligence organization, I recommend that.
Terrific, Laura. Thank you very much. So again, we have a few more minutes, so if anybody wants to sneak in another question, there is time to do so. Otherwise, as Laura said, a copy of the presentation is going to be available if you'd like to contact Laura directly or to us, DMA Communities at thedma.org. We can get that to you. A recording will also be sent either later today or tomorrow morning so that you can hear anything that you may have missed, and also if you'd like to share with colleagues. So I'm not seeing anything pop in right now, Laura. If you'd like to have any postscript on the webinar or any final remarks about perhaps those analytic skills, or if you're already perhaps mid-career, what an executive can do to have a fast track learned.
Oh yeah, well, I understand that about having a fast track learn. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who gave time today to sit in on this presentation. Thank you. I appreciate it. Time is one of our most precious assets and resources, so I definitely want to thank you for that, especially since we are last week of the month, last week of the quarter, end of the first half of the year. And then in answer to your question, Lisa, I think if you're wherever you are in your career, we're always learning. All of us are always learning. And so pick up some books, go to some events. I mean, coming today is something you're already doing. That's great. Find some peers that are better at it than you are and spend some time with them. I think that's some of the things that we can all do. You've got a great analytics community, so join it, be active in it. Reach out to the suppliers that you're working with, find out which ones of them are good at it, and build some relationships with those folks. And I think those are some great places. And that apply no matter what we're trying to learn at whatever stage in our careers.
That's true. And I'll give a plug for our DMA Education Department. We have many selections on courses online and in person. Different modules that you could do at your own pace, and so that might be something people might want to check out as well. So again, Laura, as far as time goes, thank you so much for yours and sharing your expertise today. We will again be reaching out to all the registrants and attendees as far as sending them a recording of the presentation. And again, if you'd like a copy of the slides, Laura will be happy to make those available to you. Just contact us or Laura directly, and we'll make that happen. And again, if you have any suggestions for future topics, just let me know, and we'll be happy to consider them on the next Leadership Council meeting. So once again, everybody, again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Laura, for your time and expertise. Everybody have a safe 4th of July weekend that's coming up quickly, and a safe summer. And again, for those of you who might be joining tomorrow for the Mobile and Digital Community webinar on basically customer retention, we look forward to hearing from you then too. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you and goodbye.